Welcome to an inspirational people interview on the Share Life podcast. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and today I'm speaking with writer, director, and storyteller Salvatore DiSalvatore. Did I get that right?
You did. Good job.
I know him as Jack, and he is also a communications team leader at a parish here in Georgia. Jack, say hello.
Hi, everybody.
I'm glad to have you here for you to share your story with us. Why don't you just jump in and tell us who you are and a little bit about where you come from?
All right. Thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me, first of all. All right. So, just a little bit about my story. Just to sum it up in like one word, um, story is probably the driving force of my life that also works in tandem with another driving force, which is my faith. And together they kind of work and have created a wonderful vocation, but it's also something I can't turn off. So it just continually stays with me throughout my whole life.
Yeah.
So it's an
So,
ongoing thing.
yeah. Now tell us, since you mentioned story, when you think of story, like what's the first story that you experienced when you were young, like that you really resonated with or that connected with you?
It's easy. I could tell you the very first film I saw.
Okay.
I was 2 years old, and
Okay.
my parents took me to see Superman.
The
And
very
I
first
can
one?
remember vividly the red drapes in the movie theater.
Mm,
I remember the popcorn. I remember the red drapes. I remember the opening because movie theater drapes open, and then the opening of the movie theater drapes open.
yeah.
So it like as a 2 year old, it just left me kind of like, what? And uh it was the first story I really connected with, like the mythology, the grandiose of Superman, and it just tapped into a vein of something that I've wanted to do my whole life.
Yeah. And do you remember anything specific in that movie itself?
The thing that stuck with me like to this day is the music.
Yeah.
Like the score of that film
Mm,
just stands to me. And I remember as being that little and like wait the long journey till he becomes Superman.
yeah.
I think it's like an hour into the film until you actually see him, don the cape. And to me, that was like the first time I'm like, whoa, like this is a Superman movie. We're Superman.
Yeah.
So like the anticipation of waiting to see
When is he
him.
going to show up? When is he going to show up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like it's crazy. Like my parents would take me to movies like at that age. So I saw like Superman first, then I saw Star Wars, which also had a deep effect. And I saw that in a drive-in, so that had like a
Mm,
different vibe. But the first movie where they're like, okay, this little child is having a hard time for the first time was Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and I
okay.
remember going to it, and I didn't sit through it all, and I remember I cried and wanted to go home. So
Yeah.
clearly, something in Star Trek: The Motion Picture moved me. I think it was because it was so slowly paced, um, and it wasn't like the TV show that I used to watch.
Mm,
So it like threw me off.
yeah.
So yeah, those are like the first big three. And then the other film that left me where it ticked the writer bone where I had to go home and write for the first time was when I was, let's see, 4, and I saw Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
And so when Superman, Star Wars, Star Trek, and then Empire Strikes Back. And Empire Strikes Back to me had a profound effect because it was the first time the good guys lost.
Mm,
And in my 4-year-old brain, I couldn't comprehend that because everything I had been told up until that point is the good guys win. So I remember going home that night and taking out like a legal pad and writing my own ending because I couldn't sit
mm.
with such a downer ending. So that was the first time I tried to start
So
telling a story.
lean into that a little bit because why do we have a hard time with that? Like,
Uh,
what's going on there?
to be honest, I like looking back, I think it was like the first tick of innocence lost. Because up until that time, like everything is kind of, it's through a child's eyes, so everything's wonderful. Santa Claus and
Hmm.
rainbows.
So it's a form of disillusionment.
Mm-hmm. And it hit me hard.
Yeah.
And it's one of two that did it as a kid.
Yeah.
So, and then it sticks with me like as an adult and as a storyteller, especially when I would write kid shows for churches. It stuck with me, and not that like that. It's a good word, disillusionment. Um, it kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Inspired a lot of the writing that I was
Mm,
informed and informed a lot of the writing that I was doing. And the other film was Transformers the movie.
okay.
And I remember going to see that, and all of the Transformers die in the first 15 minutes. And I'm like, this, I don't understand, like, what's happening. And it didn't scare me. It just made me go, you
Yeah.
can do this? That was where I felt like you could do anything in story. That's when stories opened up for
Mm.
me. And then
And you're talking about the original animated
the
Transformers,
animated
right?
one, yeah,
Yeah.
where Optimus Prime dies. For
Yeah.
me, I'm like, it just opened up a toolbox. And I was like, wow, you could do anything with stories.
Mm. So it opened it up. Now, when you were writing your ending to Empire Strikes Back, did you write a happy ending? Is that essentially what you
Yeah,
did?
I couldn't comprehend that like Han Solo was frozen in carbonite. Like I didn't get
Yeah.
that whole thing, and I kept thinking he was just like alive inside a block of ice. So I had like
Yeah.
Chewbacca break the ice.
Yeah.
That was
Oh,
just
okay.
my 4-year-old brain.
Yeah.
I
Well, it's
didn't.
interesting, and yeah, I think we as a kid we can have a hard time with it, but I think even as adults we have a hard time with it. So it doesn't go away just because we get older.
Yeah.
um, and whether it's a story, a fictional story, but or a true story, right? I think
Hmm.
me and you we met at the Story Lab, and you were there when I opened up my book from the Garden to the Cross here, and it's a lot. A lot of what this is about is kind of a disillusionment
Mm.
journey, which is the cross crucifixion story is a sort of a story of the bad guys winning in its
Hmm.
isolated sense, right? It's the
Hmm.
Empire Strikes Back.
Hmm.
So
And
yeah,
uh,
go ahead.
no, and it's interesting you bring that up. So when I was writing for kids, Easter is a big weekend,
Mm,
and we would always tell the Easter story, the resurrection story. This goes back to like every church I worked for, and when I was a Protestant, and every year I'm like, the kids are not connecting at all. Like it's
hmm
just another story to them. Like they are not feeling this. So one year I went to the leadership and I'm like, I want to do something a little out there for like church ministry. And they were like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I want to split, and I want to tell the crucifixion. I want to kind of do an allegory, and I want to build to Easter, and I want Palm Sunday to be where the bad guys win, and I want the kids to sit in it, and they're not going to get resolution for a week.
mm,
They're like, I don't
yeah.
know, and I'm like, and then when we come back on Easter, they're going to actually finally feel what the cross felt. It's a
hmm
theory, and I don't know if this will work, but I think it can, and it did.
Yeah.
It was one of the best things I did.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
I think one of the kind of takeaways is you can't have a resurrection without a death,
yeah.
and you can't have death without pain
Hmm.
and darkness and despair.
Hmm.
And I think modern Christianity suffers because, in retrospect, we know the end of the story, and so we could skip right to the resurrection. But we kind of skipped a piece of the story, and it's sort of absorption and absorbing the story. And I think it distorts how we see our faith in God and Christ. So it's interesting that you describe that because you're trying to take them through that process to experience it as it would in a sequential way versus sort of seeing it all in retrospect.
Yeah, and it was wild because, and it took a lot of discipline because, like, from the very first episode, I knew this is what had to happen. So it informed, and I think it was episode 28 is when
Oh,
it
okay.
is. So it took 28 episodes, and then I had a Judas character, and I'm like, I need to get them invested in this character, and then slowly have him turn.
Mm,
And I'll be honest, I'm going to go back, and I don't know if this is a rabbit trail, but you want to know what informs my story and like how
go
I
ahead.
wrestling, pro wrestling to me, and I was even talking about this with my wife. It the way they can turn heels into baby faces and they can have the audience viscerally react to it. Always fascinated me, and I think it's like some of the best storytelling because you could be loving a wrestler, they make
Hmm
them do something, and instantly you're like, oh, I don't like them anymore. And it's such a
Okay.
powerful, powerful thing, especially when it happens in like a room of 18,000 people.
hmm
And you feel it all happen at once that everybody went from loving this person to hating this person.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to do without it feeling forced, which they do
Hmm.
really well. And that was kind of what I used to turn the Judas character. And it was real slow. And then I started to ramp it. And what was interesting is the way the church worked. We'd show the episode, and then the kids would sit and talk and about it. And as it was happening, they were very invested in the character that was turning. And
Mm.
they would discuss it and go, I think he's making bad choices. I'm very different. And he was a fan favorite. And he was like the goofy clown, and they were like, I think he's
Yeah.
making bad choices, and I don't know where this is going to go. And then when we got to the cross episode where everything goes sideways, it was even more devastating because the leader's gone. The character they really liked was the one who did it,
Mm.
and all the bad guys win, and we literally go black. Like the episode ends with like a
Yeah.
dark, like it's literally darkness wins, and
Yeah.
you could feel the room. A pin could drop.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite Marvel movies is Infinity War.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what it does is it's really a story about the villain. The villain is the protagonist and it ends with him winning.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very intense ending. And a lot of people did struggle with it. I mean, I think, they know there's another part, so it's not as though they feel it's the end of the story, but it was quite a dramatic turn of events for sure.
Yeah. It was cool. They haven't been able to replicate it since.
Yeah. So that kind of intersects story with faith. So tell us, when you're that 2-year-old watching Superman, and then you're watching Star Trek and Star Wars, what's faith look like for you and your family? What did it look like growing up?
So I was raised evangelical, which there's a lot of good and a lot of bad in that. From an early age, I really connected with God being real and God being um, personal, and it informed like everything. Like I can remember being like 6 or 7, reading the Bible and getting it and understanding it. But then here comes the other thing. There's people involved in church. And that side of things got really wacky because then there's bad teaching. And like when you're a kid, you know something's off, but you can't quantify it.
Mm,
And
like
you
what
can't.
did you feel like? What kind of a feeling did you have?
I remember looking, like, I remember it feeling not authentic. Like, I
Was
don't think,
insincere. Yeah.
yeah. And I remember going, this doesn't feel right. And I remember like I would always have like questions, and I would question all the time. And if we're going to jump into this, let's go. 6th grade is when it really came to a head for me, where I went to a private Christian school, and there was a girl in my class. I was in 6th grade, and she brought a Bible translation that didn't fit in with what the school liked.
Mm.
And the teacher's like, the Bible's not allowed.
Oh wow.
And I was like, that doesn't make sense. And I'm young and not really as well spoken as I am now. So I'm like, I'm just going to run on emotion here, and I'm going to go, that's wrong. So I remember like standing up to the teacher, and I ended up getting into an argument defending this person. And I
Yeah.
didn't have like a stake in the fight. It wasn't like I believed in everything
Hmm.
this girl believed, but it was like, there's something wrong here. And I just kept challenging this teacher to the point where it ended with him calling me a heretic. And
Wow.
then, and I'm 12, and then he was like, "You're like a Thomas Jefferson. You read the Bible for what you want, and then you just cut out everything else." So he's like, "I'll never forget this." He literally told me to get my Bible and cut it,
Oh wow.
and I was like, "Wow, I don't. This is really, really bad." So if we want to take it back to what we were talking about earlier, if Empire Strikes Back was my storytelling disillusionment, this was the beginning of my faith journey disillusionment.
Mm.
And I was just like, and it was a seed that kept growing all the way up.
Were you aware of it, or was it more like subconscious?
It was subconscious, but
Yeah.
it set the thing in motion where like
Mm.
everything's not
The
right.
cognitive dissonance started to work its way. Yeah.
Yeah. And like the faith still stayed there, but again, the innocence wasn't there anymore. Like I wasn't following it blindly. And
Mm.
that moment just kept repeating itself as I got older with and had more questions and more questions. I remember being in youth group, and at the same time through all this, there was also an aspect of bullying that was happening in my Christian
Towards
school.
you or
Yeah,
towards other people you knew?
towards
Okay.
me.
Yeah.
And anytime I made a stand, and this was like a tension that always kind of happened in my walk, especially at that age between like 12 and 17. There's always a moment where I could fit in, but then in order to do that, I had to make a choice of giving up a value, and I could never give up the value. And then I knew if I
Okay.
didn't, if I made the stand, I would then become bullied, and it happened all the time. And I could just never just fit in. I could never just let me just be the square peg in a square peg. I would always have to, or the square peg in a round hole. Like I don't want to go round. I got to stay square.
Yeah.
And it just kept, and like by the point that I ended up in high school, I didn't believe in God anymore because I was just too confused.
Mm. So if that person is listening to this now, what would you tell that person now if they're
It's
in that
all part of
place?
the plan. It's all part of the plan. For me, that especially that season of uncertainty, it allowed me to empathize with people who struggle with
Yeah.
faith, and I'm so glad I went through it. It took a while to get to um, make resolution with that because it's a wound. But it eventually, especially as I got stronger in my storytelling, I'm like, I could use this now, and this is
Hmm.
going to become fuel in my storytelling cabinet.
Yeah. You mentioned the word just being able to empathize with people going through that. And I think that's real important. And I'd like you to dive into that a little deeper because, I tend to be evangelistic and I like having friends and talking with people that are not Christians or
Mm-hmm.
other faiths or other, you know, worldviews if they are Christian. And I invite that and I participate in that. And so I have that sensitivity, but I do see a lot of Christians who don't do that and they get in this weird dogmatic self-sealing bubble, and I feel like they're doing things kind of in line with what they think is their faith, but they don't actually consider or care about the unbelievers or people that are in other religions, and so they do things that are actually causing harm. Blind spots, I guess I would say. They have these giant blind spots. What would you say to that? How would you make kind of reconcile that?
It's probably coming out of an insecurity
Hmm.
where their faith is in their faith, but not necessarily in God.
Okay.
And
So a bootstrapped faith.
unpack that a little more. What do you mean by bootstrap faith?
Like it's I'm sort of willing my own faith. I'm sort of
Yeah,
an independent, an autonomous faith, if you will.
yeah, like
Almost
this.
a faith in myself.
I'm
Yeah.
supposed to have this, even though the faith is up here and it's not here.
Okay.
So
Got
it's
it.
a
Yeah.
head faith, not a heart faith. Because and then in trying to evangelize that way, and I did this when I was a kid, when I was working out my faith. Like if I got somebody to believe in God, that means God's real and I'm following the right way.
Hmm.
And that's me at 13, 14. It's not me in my
Yeah.
40s. And the stronger my relationship with God got or became, and the more intimate it became, the less proving I have to do. And it's all
Yeah.
about him, and it's not about me at all.
Yeah.
Which that takes a lot. It's like a relationship. You have to just keep building on it to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it just the teacher you mentioned, like that's what they did is they did something that maybe you said, like based on what you said, like out of insecurity, they did something that harmed you and this other student. But if it also been like someone that wasn't even a Christian, like it might have just hurt them even, in a whole nother level or a different level. That type of behavior doesn't necessarily mimic the way of Jesus, right?
No. And this is a interesting thing in my relationship with God. Like God is a grand storyteller for me.
Yeah.
And my life is the book he's writing. And when I just let him, granted, I sound like, oh yeah, let God do it. The amount of wrestling that goes on in my life to get to that point could be this, like it's a tome. But God always does these weird, interesting through lines through my life. So like that school, where the teacher and I clashed. So I was 12. 10 years later, I went back to that school before I went to film school as a teacher. So I'm
Yeah.
in that classroom, in that spot as the teacher.
Yeah.
I have the ability now because the power's on my side now. I'm not the student. And as I'm teaching, I find
Mm,
myself like watching the kids that are getting bullied. And I'm like, oh, I get to speak in and be that teacher that I didn't have. And it was only a
yeah.
short time, like got out only for like 3 months, but it was
Yeah.
a powerful 3 months. And I remember sitting there and there was a kid, tall, lanky like I was, and just he would just get mocked by kids all the time. And one day I was just like, dude, fight through it. It will end if you don't let it get you. And I'm like, just keep pushing because like usually to quote and like I'm quoting Bob Dylan to this kid. This kid has no like people criticize what they don't understand and they just don't understand you yet. But that
hmm
doesn't mean as you get older, you're going to meet people that will and they're going to
hmm
embrace it. But right now, that pool is very large of people who don't understand you. And
Yeah.
as you get older, you're going to be able to pick your pool.
Yeah.
And it was just like it was cool. And like God has done that for me numerous times. Like high school, I had a teacher who put me in a situation, and it's always teachers for some strange reason. I used to, I was a complete nerd in middle school and high school, like most of us are. And my friends and I couldn't get dates. And I remember one night there was like a dance, and we couldn't get anybody to take to the dance. So we were like, so that night I'm like, let's put a TV show on. Let's create a TV show. I'm 13. Like the fact that that even popped in my head kind of shocks me. And they're like, what are we going to do? I'm like, we love Saturday Night Live. Let's make our own. So like
Yeah.
we titled it. It was called Philadelphia Unconscious, and it was sketches. And during the school day, we all went to different schools. We would write sketches out, call each other on the phone, and go, "This is my sketch. This is yours." And then we would have everything. We vet it amongst
hmm
each other. We had like a little comedy troupe, and then Friday nights when the dance was going on, we were gonna film them,
Yeah.
and we did. And then we did it all through high school, and it went from like eighth grade all the way to 12th grade. And one year, one of the teachers found one of the tapes,
Mm.
and it was like, oh no. And she was like, I think I want to show it to the class. And I'm like, this is not meant to be shown to anyone. And she was like, no, I think it should. She did not like me. And I was like begging her. I'm like, please don't do this. I'm already getting picked on. Like, that's not ad fuel. And she did. And I was like, all right, if you're going to show the tape, which I don't know how that was even okay, let me not be in the room because I'd rather like hear the laughter from afar than because it's not like the laughter I want. It's laughter pointed at me. And she's like, okay, so I'm sitting in the hallway and another teacher sees all this. It's like, what is going on? And she goes into it and goes to the teacher and she's like, what you're doing is killing this young man's dreams today, which goes against everything a teacher should be. And she's like, I hope one day when he grows up, he makes something and gets to throw this day back at your face. And I was like, yeah, yes, yeah, she's right. I'm like, and I took it with me. And here's the wild thing, Jason. I was 14. On my 31st birthday, I signed my first contract to write a movie. And not a good movie, but it was a movie. I went out with a couple friends that night to a play, and sitting in the audience was that teacher 14 years later. And I had it, or 17 years later, and I'm like, I hadn't seen her, and I'm like, what do I say? This is such a crazy moment. Like, this woman made fun of me in class. Like, who gets this? And I just sat there. I didn't even watch the play. I just kept thinking, like, what do I do in this? This is such a golden moment. And the play ended, and she left, and I'm like, I just froze. And I'm like, no, I got to say something. So I just went out, saw her in the lobby, and I was just like, hey, many years ago, you taught me ninth grade Italian in homeroom. I just wanted to say to you, today I signed my first professional screenwriting contract, and I just want to say thank you. And that was it. And I walked away. But just to get that closure of this wild moment of a 14-year-old kid, that's what God does. Like, it might take 17 years, but there's always a weird closure to these moments in my life.
Yeah. So 31, that happens. Take
Hmm.
us from that moment in high school to that point of turning 31. What happened in between?
A lot. Lost faith, God faith. And here's the interesting thing about that. When I lost my faith, Jason, I also lost my desire to storytell.
Oh, interesting. So they were
And
tethered together, or they just were
I didn't,
somehow
I think they
intertwined?
are. And I didn't realize it probably till just this podcast, but um, there was a time where like that wasn't even something I was trying to chase or try to do, and it was when I didn't have any faith in God. Like that whole desire of my life, first 2 years of college was gone,
Hmm.
and then when
What did you pursue then, vocationally?
politics.
Politics. Okay.
I wanted to be a politician.
Okay.
I want to be a lawyer, but then eventually get into politics.
Okay.
And then when I
A
came
particular
back,
type of lawyer?
uh, I wanted to be a senator, so I knew I needed to go to law school to get to.
Okay.
That was my dream.
So it was more of like political law that you were trying
Mhm,
to learn. Okay.
mhm.
Yeah.
And when I came back to God, that died right away, and thankfully. Um, and then the storytelling kicked back in, like overnight. It was
Hmm.
wild, and I had a bad breakup in college, and I remember sitting down. I needed to process it, and I wrote my first screenplay. Awful. It's in three different formats because I didn't know how to format a screenplay.
Hmm.
So it's written like a novel, then it's written like a screenplay, then it's written like a play. But I wrote it, and I wrote it
Yeah.
for this girl, and it kicked the bug back in. And then I knew like
Mm.
I'm eventually going to go to film school once I graduate college because I was an English major by that point. And then that brought it back in. And then once I got to film school, that opened up everything.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is like when I was in my first year, I got distracted again, and filmmaking kind of became second.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to date and have fun. Had a bad breakup. Once that ended, filmmaking kicked back in. Met this weird group of misfits that we kind of became like this like storytelling cabal, and it just again stories just started popping out.
Yeah.
And then there was another wilderness when I graduated film school where, it's not easy to break into the industry. And I thought the Christian industry would be cakewalk. No, not easy at all. And this is another cool story uh, where God steps in again. So I had a friend in film school who's almost the exact opposite of me. Like, if you ever met us, you would never think we were friends. Like, he's from the South, like Shreveport, Louisiana, and I'm from Philly. Like, he's real quiet, real thoughtful, very reserved, and I'm like loud and boisterous Italian. We
Yeah.
became really good friends, and I had a teacher who was like, I see your talent. I see this young guy in my other class, Steve. He's like, why don't you guys work together? I think it could be really powerful. And I'm like, we're friends. I don't want to be friends, so I'll never ask. And he was really ambitious and made a film. Like I remember being in film school, like, what do you want to do? And he's like, I'm gonna make a film when I'm 26. And I'm like, bro, we're 25. Like you're not gonna make a movie in a year. He did, and it bombed, and kind of he kind of spun, and then we kind of at that point, I'm like, let's make something together. I'll write it, you'll direct it, we'll go pitch it. And we wrote this really interesting story that I would love to bring back, and which is kind of an homage to like the '80s action films, which is kind of where our minds were at the time. And he gets a phone call. We're going to go to LA. We're going to go. We have a pitch deck. We have everything ready to go. And the movie that bombed, the lead actor was in another movie. And they're like, "Hey, we just fired our director. We'd love for you to step in." And he's like, "Dude, I'm not going to LA. I'm going to go do this film." And I'm like, "Oh." And I'm like, God, like how? Come on, I was this close. Like, and I
Yeah.
already waited 5 years, and like now I got to wait again. And I remember praying that night, and I got into a little with God, and I was like, you remind me of like uh, one of those deadbeat dads that makes pie crust promises, and it's like I'll see you on the weekend, but you don't show up. That's what I feel like it is. And all of a sudden, I just felt like this feeling in my spirit, like open your Bible and check yourself. And I opened up my Bible, and I'm reading through my devotions, and there was a psalm, and it said the people did not enter the land God had for them because they did not believe His promises. And like this is 2 seconds after I just accused God of not keeping His promises. And I was like, okay, I'm going to trust you. And I'll tell you, the door opened after that. And I ended up writing the film.
Mm.
And it was wild because he became the director, hated the script, met with the investors. It was like, you need a new script. And they're like, well, we're shooting. So I needed to see a script tomorrow. And he calls me up. It's a Sunday night, and he's like, "Dude, I need a script by Tuesday." And I'm like, "You want me to revise this entire script in a day?" And he's like, "If you want your shot." And I'm like, "There's no way. Like, it's going to be garbage. Like, I can't write 120 pages in 2 days." And I prayed again, and God's like, "You don't need to do it. Just write the first act. You can
Hmm.
do a first act in 2 days. And if they once they see your first act, they'll know that this is better." And that's all I did was write the first act. They loved the first act, and they called me up and like, "We'll give you a couple of weeks to write the rest." And then that was the beginning of my career.
And is that the
And
same contract you got at 31, or is this a
yeah,
different
it's the
thing?
same contract I got at
Okay.
31.
So
The
that's how you
script was
got.
handed in on my 31st birthday.
Okay. So
And
that's the story shift. Tell us how the faith shifted from non. Would you could have considered yourself an atheist or just agnostic?
when I was in college,
Yeah.
I'll come up with a new word. I knew God was real.
Okay.
I'd seen too much as a kid, but I was so angry.
Hmm.
So I don't know if there's an antagonistic, like it's like a
Anti-theist.
yeah, like I knew he was real, but I was so mad that I wanted to spite him.
Hmm. So the
Like
spirit of Cain. That's the spirit of Cain,
Spirit of
isn't it?
Cain, and like I'll tell you, like who I really connected with, like music is really big for me. 9 Inch Nails, like oh, I would listen to Pretty Hate Machine all the time, and I'm like, this guy gets it. I know exactly what he's writing from.
What did it was? What specifically was it that you got
Just
from
the
that?
way Trent Reznor, all his albums are kind of informed by his faith or lack of faith, and that album especially is a man you watch someone go and you listen to someone's faith completely break down over the course of an album, and every song is kind of informed. It's almost like a concept album of losing faith, and like
Hmm.
from Down in It to there's a song called Sin. Like you listen to him struggle to the point where uh, he just kind of breaks away from God, and that became like my anthem album that I would just listen to all through freshman year. And one night I put myself in a position that I should not have put myself in, and the only way out was I knew it was almost like Jonah and the whale. It was like a dark night of the soul. And I asked God, like, if you're real, and like I'm done fighting you, and if this is what you want, I'm back, but I need you to show up. And he did. I felt this. I cannot describe it. It was almost like a wind. It was like a confidence wind that just came into me after I prayed that. And there was a lot into that story.
How
But
old were you?
18, going to be set 19, and everything changed. And like God just like I could just feel his presence, and like out of that, all the hurt, all the anguish of like all the bullying and just the confusion of childhood, kind of like stayed in that room when I came out, and I never looked back. I mean, there have been moments where I've doubted and I've gotten mad and fist, but I he never left, or I never left him.
Yeah.
So, and like I
And
said, there
so
are moments where I've been on that floor crying, like I don't know where you are, and every time, like he shows up every time. I'm at my breaking point. God shows up.
so would you tell that person that they're about to hit that point? They're listening to Nine Inch Nails the way you were. What do you tell them?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing because there's a story into why that person's there that I don't know, and it's different from the story I was in when I was there. But there is a light. There is like no matter how broken you are, and if you just give in and release the struggle, that's I think the key. Is you got to put your fist down. You got to put the arm wrestling down. You got to give up. Not like give up life, but go God. I surrender to you. And it usually and I'm telling you, Jason, it has circles. Like I've tracked this every 4 years. I feel like I go through that with God, where I hit a dark point, and then God does something miraculous, like absolutely out of the norm, that lets me go. He's there, and then it feels and like it's cool is each time it happens. Like the first time it was very personal, but each time I find myself in that wheel and God does what God does, it always involves more and more people.
Hmm.
and the story doesn't become just about me anymore.
Yeah.
Like last time I had it like was when I was working in church ministry, and it was awful, awful. I was working for a mega church, completely disillusioned, um, shady stuff, witnessed some stuff, just awful, awful treatment of people, and I didn't know what I was believing anymore. And it was a bad Christmas, and I went home to like visit my parents, and I was just like, I don't know what I believe anymore. I don't know if God's real. I don't think He cares. And Jason, I'll tell you, it got worse. And here's the wild thing. I should tell you this part of the story. This is what I'm saying. Like other people are involved. I became friends by accident with this producer who produced animated faith-based stories for kids called Superbook.
Okay.
He had a movie coming out soon, and he just posted on Facebook. Like, I'm not done yet. It was like this. We had never talked. He graduated 5 years before me. We were friends because we were alumni of the same school. But it was like this just empowering quote. And I just decided to like message him like, dude, you have no idea who I am. But I just want to let you know, thank you for writing that. And he's like, can I give you a call? And I'm like, sure. And he calls me up a couple days later. He's like, yeah, I'm on my way to Comic-Con. And he's like, but you want to just sit and talk? I'm like, yeah. So we're talking about like the stuff I'm struggling with. And he's like, I want to pray for you, man. And I'm like, cool, thank you. I need all the prayer right now. And he's praying for me. And Jason, he's like, I'm going to tell you something I'm feeling. He's like, life's going to get bad. It's going to get worse than you're in right now. And a storm's coming. And the only thing I can tell you is don't let go of God in that storm. Trust Him through it. Because he's like, sometimes storms come because they're the only thing that can move what's blocking you.
Mhm.
The obstacle needs a storm to move it. And I was like, okay, thanks. Not exactly encouraging as I get ready to go back into this ministry job. And everything he said was correct. It got worse, way worse. And I didn't let go. And I just kept holding on and holding on. I'm like, God, even on like my knuckles,
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going. And I think I'm going to like just my career and everything's going to end in Oklahoma, which is the worst place for me in the world. I did not like that state. Sorry, Oklahomans. And but God just kept holding me, hold on. A door opened out of nowhere that let my career go to a whole other level. And the day I got that job, I called that guy back, and I was like, first call, phone call, and I get excited, especially when there's an emotional quotient to me. And he answers the phone, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna say his name, but I'm like, thank you so much. You're right. You hear from God. I just want you to know you hear from God. Like, just, bro, thank you so much. Like, you just hear from God. And he started crying. And I was like, oh, sorry to call you at a bad time. I'm very sorry. He's like, no, no, no. He's like, I'm going through a really hard time. And when I go through a hard time, I need to run. So I go to a track. And when I'm going through such a hard time, I can't hear from God. So I'm on the
Mm.
track. And I just am praying and I'm like, God, I can't hear you anymore. I can't hear you. And I don't know what to do. I
Mm.
can't hear you. And the phone rings. I see it's you. And I'm like, I can't answer this. I don't have any encouragement for this guy. I can't answer this phone. And he's like, but I did. And you're yelling at me that I hear from God when I'm crying to God that I can hear him. And I'm like, wow, like that is just like, you can't write that. That's God changing two lives at the same time. And
Yeah.
I've never met him in person.
Hmm.
And both of our lives, he got me through a hole, and unintentionally, God used me to get him through a hole, and he's in an
Hmm.
incredible place.
Yeah.
And that's faith to me.
Mm.
That's the faith journey.
Yeah.
So
Now, how long ago was that?
that was 2015. So 10 years ago, actually 10 years ago this April.
Okay. Now you're in this church environment that's causing you to question your faith once again. Um, how do you reconcile that with the fact that God now is answering your prayer at the end of this storm? Like, how are you reconciling these pieces at the time and in retrospect?
At the time, it was just like I could continue. I have the energy to move to the next step. It's like a ladder.
Hmm.
Like I could get to the next rung. That was at the time. And I remember once it happened, I'm like, I'm going to be at this point again. Like this, by this point, I had been wise to like the cycles, and I'm like, there's going to be a low point coming. Like I'm feeling really good, but a couple years from now, I'm going to be in this dark place again, and I need to be prepared for it.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it happened again.
Hmm.
like clockwork, almost same time frame.
Yeah.
But this time, instead of I broke, but instead of like this, it was more like a defeat. Like
Mm.
I don't know if I have strength anymore to keep pushing. And then
Yeah.
God did what God does once again, like in a big, big way.
Yeah.
So and He continues to do it, and like it's the story of my life. Like I don't know if you want that break and redemption. I can
What
tell
do
you
you
that
mean?
story too,
Yeah,
because
go ahead.
so I moved. So I left Oklahoma, went to Minneapolis, and Minneapolis is not an easy state to live in, especially in the winter. Um, it's pretty isolated, pretty cold, and I was doing really powerful things, like the show I was telling you about earlier, that were we made the cross real. Um, but I was getting lonely. I was single, and I was getting older, and I just didn't feel like this was a prayer that God was going to answer. And I'm having more success than I've ever had, but I'm isolated and I'm in solitude in it. Met somebody and checked all the boxes. Although deep down, I'm like, this is not good. It's a surface level box, but the deep
Mm.
box isn't connected. But I'm like, I don't want to be this way anymore. And then all through that relationship, heavy stuff started happening. Like I lost my cousin, just horrible things. And she dumps me on Valentine's Day
Oh, wow.
after dinner, which was expensive. And I'm just like, God, I'm dumped on Valentine's. Like, what a cliche. And I completely had like 2 weeks of like really working through that. We're usually a hit like that could take a while. And I'm like, I'm giving it to you. I'm turning it off. You got the next. Instead of playing this game where I'm going to run from you, I'm running into you this time. And you have the next 60 days. I'm just going to go all in. And God, it was an incredible. I made some mistakes in there, um, a lot, but I never let go. Never struggled to let go. And then about a year after that, which again we're in the cycle, I'm going through a very long winter polar vortex, negative 30 degrees, and I just felt like this prayer of meeting someone would never happen.
Hmm.
And I went to a Paul McCartney concert. The Beatles are a huge, huge thing for me. And I went to see him in Lambeau, and it was always like a bucket list. And I'm listening to Hey Jude, and I'm listening to the lyrics, and they're hitting me in a really weird way. When you hear people singing in unison, like 40,000 people, it's very powerful. And there's a moment where the movement you need is on your shoulder. It's that line. It just resonated deep in my spirit. I just felt like God, it was almost like a tap. And God's like, I know what you're praying for. I know what you want. It's coming. Don't give up. And like as the na-na-nas kick in, I'm like, God's got this. I'm not gonna feel alone. And 2 weeks later I met my wife.
Wow. What
And
year was that?
that 2019.
Okay.
So
So
four
six
years
years ago.
after the last one.
Yeah.
And that's the way God's always done it. Like a cycle every 4 years.
Yeah.
It's really good storytelling, and but it's also like I need to just relax in that trust. But yeah, I
Hmm.
met her and right at the right time, because then you know what happens in 2020.
Yeah. Pandemic.
Well, so
So how does okay, so give us an update from 2015 to 2019 on the work side. So what were the what was the door that opened that led to other types of work? Were you still
this is where
writing and
this is where things go sideways. So so my next step is I get married. I'm expecting God to, my career's at like an apex. Like I'm like right where I want to be, and then COVID happens, And the two things I
Mm.
do best, film and church, are gone. I'm newly married, and it's going in a puff. And none of
Hmm.
these things are open.
Hmm.
And thankfully, God was able to, and a very patient wife, God was able to keep, keep sustenance. But all I can wait for is like, okay, once this opens, I'm going to get the third church, and then that'll take me to another level. And I got the third church. Only this time I'm not an employee, I'm a consultant, which is what I've been praying to do.
Mm.
And in the middle of that, we get our delayed honeymoon, and we're going to go to Italy. Now I'm thinking I'm going to connect with my family that I've never seen. It's going to be like this spiritual journey, like it's ancestral. We go to the Vatican, and I feel something in the Vatican. And I'm sitting in the Sistine Chapel, and I can't quantify it, can't tell you what it is, but there is something happening in me where I do not want to get up from where I was sitting. And I'm looking at this beautiful art, and it feels like it's coming at me. And I feel like God is coming. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm feeling, but I've never felt this before. Like, this is the most awe inspiring beauty I've ever seen in my life. And I do not want to leave this room. And I can't tell you what I'm feeling. I couldn't even tell my wife. I'm like, I don't know what I'm feeling, but I want that again. So I come back, I get back into my consultant role, and I'm like, I don't know if I believe this anymore. Now I think I'm having a crisis of faith. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, I don't know what I believe anymore.
And what
And
specifically would you say that what beliefs were you specifically
just the
questioning?
whole mega church model, like everything that I had
Okay.
done, I don't know, like if this is good. I don't know what this is. I don't know what we're teaching. I don't know what Jesus we're doing. I would have questions about certain things we're teaching, like baptism. Like, what does this mean? Because I'm always about the why, especially when you're writing
Mm.
for kids. And I couldn't get to it. It was like the why. I couldn't
Mm.
answer it,
Because you're writing the content for them, so you're having to understand that and believe it. Yeah.
and I couldn't grasp it. Like something was off, and I just am like I couldn't wait for the contract to end because I'm like I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And the whole time through COVID, like I just felt like a lost ship at sea. And like I feel like Goldilocks. Like every church I would go to, I'm like, I don't feel like this fits. I don't feel like and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like connecting back to my childhood again. And I'm like, am I not fitting in? Like, is something like off? Going back to that square peg round hole. And
Yeah.
then we get to a point, and the biggest thing for me that I started to see was there's a buzzword in the megachurch world that they love: relevance, relevance, and it's what they aim to be, what they're chasing. And I started to go, it's not relevance you're after, it's pander. Like that's how you're doing it. Like
Mm.
there's no soul. Like there's nothing authentic. It's all just whatever you want us to be, we're going to be, and it will change with the culture. But I don't know if it's good. And there's no stands being made for like really important things, unless it's what society's asking for. And if society wants a stand, then we're going to make a stand now, finally. But we're
Yeah.
not going to lead the stand. We're going to see what society wants, and then we're going to come in.
Mm.
That started to bother me. And then finally, I don't want to get political on it, so I'm going to try to be a little bit more vague. It was another moment, and the church didn't make a stand. And it was like a slam dunk stand. And then I looked at my wife, and I'm like, none of the churches I worked for did. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know what I'm going to do because this is all I know. Not just as like a personal faith, but also like my vocation, what I do. Like they're all intertwined. It's a mess.
Yeah.
So I said, look, I want to try something that I never thought I'd do. I'm like, you open to go into a Catholic church? Never been in one other than for a funeral. And she was like, yeah. And I'm like, don't tell your parents, don't tell my parents. It's just, I want to see it. So we go in, we visit a church, and every church I've gone to, and this is even when I'm working for churches, Jason, there's this little piece of me that would have angst. And it started with the first disillusionment when I was 12. And ever since then, no matter how good my relationship with God is, if I'm in a church, I'm feeling angst. There's something off. There's just something I'm not sitting right with. So we go to the Catholic Church, and I don't know what to expect. I'm expecting to be bored. I'm expecting to be like, oh, this is a cult. Like, this is going to be off the reservation. And we're sitting in there, and the procession begins. The cross comes down, And it's just like, whoa, the feeling I felt at the Vatican, I'm feeling again.
Mm.
Only now I can tell you what I'm feeling. And what I'm feeling is reverence. And that was what was missing my entire journey, um, up until this point. And what was really crazy, up until that point, faith, God, everything was about me. I was the star. And God kind of worked for me. And that
Yeah.
was kind of what I
Like
was
an individualistic. Yeah.
yeah, like this, not that God's a genie in a lamp, but he kind of is. And if I do the right things, I click the right buttons, I play the controls correctly, I will
I,
unleash God power. And sitting in that pew, I became like this, and God became like this. And it was the first time I ever felt that in church.
mm,
And then that became its own journey and another journey and changed everything. And it was another step of like, okay, if I make this choice, I'm giving up everything I've known because I can't go back.
explain what you mean by that
Like, I'm not
for
going to be able
some.
to work for churches anymore, like
Mhm.
in the Protestant realm. If I make this
Yeah.
conversion, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And that has been the way, like, it's been what I do. It's my job. Like, how do I do that?
So you're risking your career in a sense.
In a
Yeah.
sense,
Yeah.
um, it feels minuscule, like to what was
Yeah.
gained in hindsight, but at the time it was
Yeah.
struggle. And um, yeah, and which once again in that timeline I was telling you before, we're coming into the same time. If you start doing the math, we're at the point 4 years in, we're another 4 years from where we were, and here I am at another first point, and I did it. Like I know, and I'm like I would never tell my wife, I'm like God's going to do something next year. And it's going to be big, and it's going to like you're going to see. You haven't seen this, but I've seen this like 6 times at this point. It's going to be wild. And you know, I became a Catholic, and it is from the moment I had communion for the first time, all that angst that I was feeling has never been brought back. I've not struggled with it. It's gone.
Mm.
I don't feel angst in church anymore. And I'm telling you, Jason, it was not fun. Um, but and once again, God came through as a story. Like the following year, door opened again. Only this time it was a little different because the door was this big, and it was a
You
lot
had
of
to go in the hole, the Alice in Wonderland hole, to
yeah.
crawl through the door.
Yeah, yeah. It felt like okay, God, if I have to do this, I have to shrink, ego, everything, and it's going to
Hmm.
be absolute trust. And I did, and I was working back in the church, but doing nothing of what I was doing before. Like I was minuscule, and God was like, "You are starting over. Do not try to like puff and go like, oh, I used to make kitchen like, no, that
Yeah.
matters now. You are to learn." And it was hard. It was humbling. There were days where I was like, I don't know if I could do this. And I remember sitting and I'm like, God, and I would cry out, why? It's like, why am I here? Like I'm doing everything you're asking me to do. And that day, God hit me with a different question. You're asking the wrong one. And I was like, what am I? What's the wrong? He's like, don't ask why. Ask what? And start asking, what are you supposed to see? What are you supposed to learn? You're here to learn. So don't ask why. So start going to work every day going, what am I going to learn today? What does God want me to see today? And that was, and just like all the other times in my life where God does this thing, I did it. And the story came back. And like, it's, I don't, this is an interesting chapter because it's a little bit more unknown. Um, but at the same time, and all through this, especially post COVID, I've written more scripts than I've ever written
Mm. For as part of your job or just for your own projects?
for me, which was different.
Yeah.
Like
Movie scripts, TV scripts.
I've written a TV script. I wrote 3 film scripts and a TV script in that time. And when I was working for churches, I stopped writing anything like
Mm.
that. Everything
Was
was
there
just pure.
why?
I would burn it. I was burnt out. Like I
Mm. You
couldn't
gave
like
him everything. Yeah.
I gave him everything. And it was like everything I wrote during that 15 years from '07 to 2020 was everything that was that I could. And I didn't have any energy to write anything. I tried to write side projects. I just didn't have it because
Hmm.
everything in my heart was going to that.
Yeah. So
So
now you move into a context where you kind of have this peace, and
mhm.
now you have energy to create again.
Yeah, but even before the piece, that was how I got through. Like, I mean, everybody remembers COVID and like just how a lot of things kind of stopped. And my wife would go, write a script now, like just do it. And one by one, they would just trickle. And sometimes I would get paid and write scripts for different production companies that didn't get paid. So that was kind of cool. But everything was a really, I got work for hire. I wish it would go somewhere, but the production company can't seem to get it in the right hands. Um, and that was a weird thing because it was a different muscle in the storytelling because usually I kind of had full control. Even though I was working for these mega churches, I was still pretty much creative directing it through the script. And I God gave me a lot of carte blanche where I could pretty much write what I wanted. Like I could pitch them an idea, I had to get it okayed. But anything I pitched would be like, "Yep, go do it." And this time I'm working like trying to get somebody else's idea and working that, which was really interesting. And trying to convey for them what they couldn't write and then try to get like what they would love to see. So that
Mm.
was a real interesting, like as a contract writer, it was real eye opening for me.
Yeah.
One of them was like, and each time, every time I write something, it feels personal.
Yeah.
Like I connect with it in some way that I don't expect. It never feels like a job.
Hmm.
It always feels like a calling to me.
Yeah. So we've tracked this faith thread through your life and this story
Mhm.
thread. Where are you now with these two layers of your life or threads throughout your life?
It's interesting you say this because I'm coming off a really interesting phase. I'm a creative, and if you ask most creatives, a really good creative, like a really top tier creative, discipline is involved somewhere. But a lot of creatives just love to just free flow and just let.
Yeah.
And I went through a challenge over the course of the beginning of the year that I didn't expect to be as profound as I thought it was. My wife just was like, I think we're going to get healthy. Let's do this really hard challenge for 75 days.
Yeah.
And usually I would be like, it's going to, no, it's going to, and I did it. We just finished this week and it changed how it's supposed to build mental toughness. And it's wild because it did in a weird way. So, like, where I'm at now is, like I said, the journey since I've converted has been, it's not been about me anymore. And I continue to feel that all the time. And there is this, like, still a struggle because I'm human where, like, I want to,
Yeah.
but I'm like, God, when the time's right, this will pop, and I'll do what I got to do. And I'm now working, like I said, as a comp team leader, which, like, it is giving me that, because that's the heart of everything I've been writing is to evangelize. Even
Hmm.
if it's stories, it's like I get to do it. Yeah, it looks a little different, but like every Monday when I sit down and look at the week, it's like this is my hope is to help. Like I said to you, like to connect them, the pain, go somewhere. Like I want God them to know that God is a solution. So I still, as long as I can do that, I feel good. Like I feel okay,
Yeah.
and that's the drive. And it's because it's real. And like as I've told you over this podcast, like I've seen so much God doing things, and I
Hmm.
don't think I'm special. I don't,
Yeah.
but He's done it, and He's done it consistently. That's the wild thing that God's done for me is that how consistent He is. Like even when I'm being a spoiled brat and entitled, He still shows up.
Hmm.
Like there, every time I'm at that line, He shows up, and then so now how do I feel where I'm at now? I have this peace, like it's all in His control, and it's like I'm just the vessel of whatever story He wants to tell.
Yeah.
If this is the way He wants this story told right now, then I am more than happy to tell.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's developing muscles that I didn't like. It's all part of the storytelling muscle. Like I just worked
Yeah.
on a project and like I've always worked with an editor. I've never edited. Like I haven't done it since film school.
Yeah.
So it was like a muscle that kind of like I lost a little bit. And like at work, I started editing again, and I'm like, wow, I forgot what this felt like. And I
Yeah.
don't have to have this person sitting me going, hey, listen to the beat, listen to the music. Come on, cut here. I'm doing it. And like, granted,
Yeah.
it's not as clean as probably somebody who's done it for a decade, but like, I'm like, oh, I'm liking this muscle. So, like, I'm a story junkie, man. Like, any way I
Yeah.
can tell it. So that
So, yeah, well, what has your story like you've trekked through this story with us and you are where you are now. So, if you're to kind of give someone that's, looking back, what did you learn about how to live well? What does it mean to live well?
this is going to sound cliche, but it's not. It's true. To live well, take your hand off the wheel. Like seriously, like what makes things hard is when I just don't trust the writer. Like every good movie, and our lives aren't movies. Like this is reality and this is real life. But we are all stories. All of us are a story. You're a story. I'm a story. And like, and I'm sure you go into this in your book, but like, since the beginning of creation, God has been telling stories to humanity. Some of them have happy endings, some of them have dire endings. It's awful. But there is a story that God weaves. And sometimes our stories are kind of just tunneled. But I think the grander story is that like God is using us and we are all in a weird way playing in this grand film that God is weaving. It's an epic. Like it's going from BC to AD and all the ways in between. And for me, what's got it is when I put my pen down and let him write the pen. Like tragedies that happen, I'm breathing in it. I'm breathing after it. Hey, you know what? This is going to turn. This is going to become something else. And that's where living well is. The more I could just trust him, to be honest, and I don't have to like get into the wrestling ring with him anymore. And I could just go, you know what? This is a hit. This sucks. But I know you're in here somewhere, and I know there's somewhere on the other side, and there's going to be a person I'm talking to that I'm going to connect with who's going through their own pain. And because I went through this pain, I'm going to be able to bond with them, and
Hmm.
I'm going to hopefully be a bridge for them, not to me, but to God. And that's where living well. Like right now, I'm. It's interesting we're going here in this because I literally started breaking this down last night, just in my own quiet time. I want to be a bridge. That's where that's where my heart is right now. And it's like I want to be a bridge for someone to like a bridge for hope. If like, but I also want to be a bridge of connection, but also everything lead to him. Like I want to be the bridge for like people to like not have to go through the wrestling angst that I had to go through.
Yeah, make it a little
And
easier for the
hopefully get
next.
them onto the other side of the quicker than I did.
Yeah.
Be the teacher that I didn't get.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
So, when you think about it from a vocational angle, like what does it look to be what does excellence in our vocation look like, and what would you tell to those aspiring or actual screenwriters that are out there?
Do the work. Do the work. Uh, for me, and it's being because here's the thing: when we're doing the work in that down valley time, every time God has me doing something like this, doesn't I am writing for no one. I am
Mm,
writing just to like. There was a time in between Book of Ruth, which was my first film, where I wrote four films that never got off the ground, and they would get close. Like one of them was a sequel to Grizzly Adams. It was one of my favorite scripts I ever wrote, and it was going to have actual movie stars in it. And I mean, not A list, but like, I mean, it's Grizzly Adams. It was a TV show, so there was going to be some cool people in it, and I loved it. And it was like something so out of like, I am not a mountain man. I am not a wilderness man, but I fell in love with that world as we were creating it. And one of the best scripts I ever wrote. Like I remember sitting down with my writing partner at the end. I'm like, dude, this is like, did not expect this to be anything but like, oh my gosh, I think this is going to be really powerful. Never went anywhere. And I'm like, that was a waste. It wasn't a waste because then that just another muscle started to form.
Hmm.
And when my first job in ministry, I had been writing, and like, if you were to ask me like who were my creative influences at the time, one of them would have been David Lynch, just to put you in a like I wanted to like really when I was in film school, I wanted to tell Christian David Lynch movies. Like these
Yeah.
artistic, deep, dark, into the soul. My first film is Book of Ruth, like not necessarily, a Lynchian film. And then when I got my first ministry job, I was under contract. I'm like, hey, can you write for kids? Never thought about it. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'll figure it out. I did. And it became something that I started to love to do. And because I got to be the storyteller for the kid in me that didn't exist. Because Christian movies sucked when I was a kid. And there was
Yeah.
nothing for kids other than like Salty the Singing Songbook.
Yeah.
And I got to do that. So, but I had to be prepared for that moment. And then all the bad scripts and all the good scripts I was writing when nobody was seeing them or the projects were getting canceled, when it came down to having that conversation, they're like, can you do this? Absolutely. Like, I remember before we got Book of Ruth, Steve and I had never written together before. And we were going to write the first script that we are going to take to LA. And we have two very different writing styles. And, like a band, you're sitting in like a room trying to write together, and it's just like, no music's coming out. This is awful. Like, I'm like wanting to get to page 50, and you're like at page two, and then it's like, we're not moving. And I was like, how about we flip this? This is going to be our working system. And we developed this working system together that it was just churning. That when we got to the Book of Ruth and we had 2 weeks to write a script, that month in like writing camp that we created by accident, we were like, oh, we know how to get this done real fast. And then that's for somebody starting out, you're going to learn. And this is something I wish I could tell myself when I was in film school. You're not good. You're not brilliant. Your idea is not unique. And no one's going to come by with a bag full of money and go make a movie. Like you're a nobody, one of a million, who are all clamoring for the, as a friend of mine in film school once put it, we're all in the grapes of wrath. And we're all running to California hoping to get some, and everybody else there is a pick or two. So like you're just lost in the shuffle. But if you really want it, you're going to keep working through it, and you're going to get up in the morning and you're going to go pick some grapes. That's what I would tell somebody. And if it's what you're supposed to do, a door will open. It will. And your job is to be ready when it does. And expect some things that you're creating are never going to be seen from anybody, but they're going to influence and start to speak into the script that maybe somebody will.
Hmm.
Like everything I've written is Frankenstein from a project nobody will ever see.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I tell people. Like you're good. Like that's what I would tell a young writer. Like expect to be Dr. Frankenstein
Yeah.
with what you write. Like that thing you're loving right now that you think is so good and game changing. It may be there might be one sentence. Like I'll tell you that first script I wrote in college for that girl. That was the very first script with three different formats. The only thing that carried over from that film was the title. And I kept using it over and over and over again. The movie still hasn't made. It's going through five different formations,
Yeah.
but it sticks. Like that's the first time I Frankenstein something.
Yeah.
So that would be my tip.
Yeah. What would you say to we talked about this individualistic orientation and the communal nature of humanity and of how God works. What would you say to someone about the idea of mentoring and both being a mentor, but also being the mentee, and that in both of those roles that we play at different parts of our lives with different people?
Can you unpack that a little bit? Like, what are you specifically getting at?
Um, what's the importance of mentoring?
Everything. And here's the thing. You're tapping another vein. One of my favorite films is Amadeus. And I love Amadeus for one reason, because it is the creative process. And it is one of the few films that I've watched where I can relate at different phases of my life as either Amadeus or Salieri. And there are times where I'm like, oh, I'm either one of these people. And Salieri to me represents the bad mentor. Like he's the bad creative that's all about him. Where he could have meant like he had such structure, which was his detriment. But if he would have brought that structure to Mozart and taught him in his gift how to become disciplined, what he could have created could have been astounding. So to
Mhm.
me, like I have been blessed that God has put incredible mentors in my life throughout my whole life. There's always been a figure, whether um, it's as a kid, there was a youth pastor, or as an adult, my first through college, there was a professor, there was a pastor. Then when I was in film school, there was a teacher that like the professor that saw the talent in the raw talent. I was like, I think you can do this. I've always had a mentor. And then what's cool for me, and then on top of the people mentors, there's the art mentors that you can absorb from. Like somebody asked me, like, who's one of my biggest mentors? Roger Ebert, the film critic. Like I eat his reviews up. Like my whole empathy vision comes from him. Like I
Mm.
read an interview with him once, and he talked about that empathy is the heartbeat of a film because it allows us to walk in someone. Like films are like a generator of empathy because we walk for 2 hours in somebody else's shoes. I'm like, I love this. Never met him, but it is infused into my life. And like, I don't read creative books by people who never create, but I'll read biographies. Like those are mentors for me, and I could see how they made their life and like what they did, and like what could I do different? What could I take from this? So mentors are everywhere. Like it doesn't have to be just the person. So that's one thing from like the Amadeus role, like you're this creative. But then where I'm at in my career now, I love moving into how do I keep somebody from going through this track and I can help them shortcut and don't have to like go through the long way. Like when I was doing The Source, which was my last real mega church project, I had somebody that was like the little, he was in the wing. So he was like my right hand. And I got to mentor this young guy from film school. And I'm like, dude, you know how special this is? Like, if when I graduated, there was a thing like this that existed. I'm like, go. And then now he's running the show. Like, to me, like, those 2 years we worked together were incredible. And, like,
Hmm.
if you want to go into, and I hope this answers your question, but I'll say this is my number one hero when people ask me who's my, like, film hero. It's not Scorsese. It's not Spielberg. I love them. Coppola. Who I would love to be is Roger Corman.
Okay.
And he was a B-list producer that no one ever heard of, but he had a production company. And what his whole thing was, he went to film schools and was like, I'm going to pluck these people out, and I'm going to give them a budget and a deadline, and I'm going to mentor them, and I'm going to let them go make their film. And
Hmm.
this guy opened the door for Scorsese, James Cameron, Amy Heckerling, Catherine Bigelow, Stevens, like all of them came through. Like you'll never hear of Roger Corman. Like you ask the guy down the street, "Hey, who's Roger Corman?" Nobody will answer that. But the people that he developed changed Hollywood, and to me, that's the that's what I would love to do.
Yeah. It's making the makers.
Yeah, making the makers.
Yeah.
It's my heart. It's like if that's my next dream, that's my next dream.
So the next layer of that, I think, is developing a structure and a system to make that possible, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
how do you think about structure and systems in as a tool and a resource for us to accomplish these grander visions?
Can you give me an example
Um,
for you?
so I'll give this is actually an interesting one. Ron Howard recent, I don't know if it's still running because of the pandemic might have killed it, but it was a creative film development program, and they invited people to sort of apply, and then if they were accepted, they would essentially go into like this 6 week program and they would work with him and other people in LA to help turn them into directors for these different films. And so it was it wasn't just sort of an organic thing. It was like an intentional designed school, right? And so that would be one example that comes to mind. Um, I think of entrepreneurship as inherently a system of mentoring if it's done right or in a healthy way. You're hiring people, you're mentoring them, you're putting them in positions of responsibility, and then they take that, and then you can add someone else, and you can create a structure. I mean, the Catholic Church would be a structure of the church that allows it to. I think you could maybe make an argument that that's a one major difference between Protestantism and the Catholic Church is the structure and the system,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know if those are good examples, but
These are great examples. I don't know if this answers your question, but if we're staying like with like if I'm a young, are we talking like me right now? Like which structure?
well,
Or
how do you think about it now, and what sort of by thinking about it that gives someone advice on how to think about it when they're maybe not where you're at, but
here's the
when
thing,
maybe.
I love working in structure because
Mm-hmm.
I can't focus without it.
Mm,
And I was talking about this with my wife the other day. Like I love a good deadline. I do.
mm-hmm.
I need it. And like if you give me like a squishy deadline, good luck getting that project done.
Mm.
But when I,
So 2 days, I need Act One. That's your go. That's your
yeah,
go-to.
I you'll get it. You'll I will find a way.
Yeah.
And like I think for creative structure is a scary thing, but it's so freeing because it's like I remember especially when I was working in some of the churches and we would come up with something, I would tell them like I need like I remember the first project they gave me like no parameters. They were like, we just want to see what you do. And I'm like, you're gonna burn. I'm gonna blow this place up. Like not like you're gonna. I need. You got to give me a budget. You got to give me a box. They didn't. And I remember like when they were shooting the stuff I wrote that they did it as an experiment to see what I would come up with without a parameter. The producer was like, dude, I want to just like bang my head against the wall. Like this is so hard to complete. And I'm like, I know. Like you didn't give me a parameter. Like what? I'm like you stretched me. Now I'm stretching you. But the more I was put into a box, like you only have room for 3 actors. You could only have one set.
Mm-hmm.
Creating in that environment created some of the best.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was at Eagle, like when I was at one church, we had unlimited budgets. Like I remember I went in one day and I was like, "Hey, I would love to have a robot costume, like a real robot costume for this." And they're like, "Yeah, we'll get one." And I was like, "Okay, like this is wild." I could get like, all right. And my other one, they were like, "Look, nobody really believes in what we're doing. They've given this amount of money. You're going to get maybe a set, 3 actors, and you can have a budget for props." So I'm like, which one do I have the most fuel with? Like, you can have a little bit more in the prop box, like your prop budget. So guess what I did that year? Like I went wild, and the props alone were informing what I was writing. Because I'm like, this is where we
Mm,
get the money.
yeah.
And people are going to see the money's going into the props. So it became like a wacky, wild show with wild props.
Yeah.
And then they were like, we can't do that again. We can't spend this much money on props. And I was like, okay. So I created a show out of that. So I'm like, I can't have a prop budget. They're like, not a lot. So I created a show about a family of wacky scientists who take the ordinary and make it extraordinary. So basically, we were using like household items and making them with sound effects look like something else.
Mm,
And it looked like we had an effect. Like, we didn't. We were using like the one character. She created a telephone out of a hair dryer. I mean, we could play with this. We could use kids' imaginations to make them believe that a telephone, like a hair dryer, is a telephone. So, like, that's what a structure does for me. Like, I think a structure
mm,
allows you to be even more creative. If that answers the
yeah.
question.
Yeah. When does the structure become tyrannical?
When it's micromanaged, when they're
Mm,
not giving you the freedom to use the structure, but when they want to make the structure use you, if that makes
mm,
sense,
yeah.
then it
Yeah.
becomes tyrannical. when they're letting you use the structure, like, hey, this is all you get this much space, and I'm
Yeah.
allowed to go in that space, then it's great. But when it becomes tyrannical, it's like, oh no, you can only go in the space in the structure where we tell you you can go, and
Yeah.
then it gets too confining. It becomes
Yeah.
claustrophobic.
It becomes a prison, it sounds like.
It does. It does become
Yeah.
a prison, and then you're just
Yeah.
thinking, how can I break this? How can I break out of this prison?
Yeah.
So,
Well, what final words do you have for us? Is there anything you wanted to share that you didn't get a chance to?
um, yeah, I'll say this: we're in a really interesting time, and there is so much content. Like everybody now has the power to create content if you want to.
Yeah.
And how do you stand out? And this is the new thing I'm like kind of embracing because I think this is lost. There's two things lost right now in story. One is the message is now the story, which I don't think was ever a thing. Like the message was in the story, but it was never the story.
Mm.
And number two, authenticity is gone in a lot of storytelling. Everything is fabricated. There's nothing, especially in mainstream. I'm sure deep in the holes of the independent world, there's a lot of unique stories and authentic stories. But the danger in that is you think you're creating something authentic. And it goes back, I'm going to tie it back into our question about the people that are kind of in your face about um, God and like they have to like evangelize to you. Here's the trick I wish I would have learned years ago. If you are writing something to prove something, whether it's an idea or an ideology or you, if you are writing to prove that you can write, or you're writing to prove that you're an artist,
Mm.
that will be awful. But if you are writing and you're confident and you're like, and it comes out of it and you have it, and it takes some time to develop this and to find it. But if you are creative, it's there. It's this deep part of you that is very vulnerable,
Hmm.
very real. If you can tap into that authentic and do it in a non-forced way where it's organically coming out of you, I think that's the next level of what people want to hear from storyteller.
So, I kind of tease that out a little bit. Like, what's coming out of the writer? Is it their own story through the story, or?
Yeah, but it's this weird balance. They're not, it's a confident vulnerability.
Mm.
That's the only way I can think about it. And again, this is something I just started like kind of phrasing in my head
Yeah.
because I think a lot of us, when we're storytellers, we want to get like, write what you know. And we kind of want people to like our scripts to like us.
Mm.
And if like you like my work, then you like me.
Yeah.
And if you're creating out of that space, and that's where like don't prove. And this is
Yeah.
where it takes discipline because you have to work out of that because it's instinctually in you when you first start.
Yeah.
But if you are writing from a place and you don't care if no one reads it or one person, like if even if it means one person read this and liked it, and that was it, and that was good, like that's what I would call confident vulnerability.
Mm. And I think that's a good contrast. You mentioned earlier that some of your concerns with the megachurch world is their pandering,
Mm-hmm.
right? That would be the opposite, is essentially, to confident vulnerability is pandering. Would you agree with that?
Oh, well, yeah, because and again, it goes back to I don't know who I am, and if you do, and that's the danger of pandering because you will get lost. The more you pander,
Yeah.
eventually the end game of pandering is you don't remember who you are anymore
Yeah.
because you pandered for so long.
Hmm. And I would add that if you're confidently vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
at at risk and with subject to criticism, you'll learn who you are deeper than you could have before.
Yeah. And if we're going to take this to a level, this is who I think does it so well. Music. It's done so well in music. Like, listen to certain songs, like, those songs where, like, wow, they're coming
Yeah.
from a place.
Whoever
And
wrote that.
what?
Whoever wrote that, they wrote
Yeah.
it from somewhere. Yeah.
And, like, this is real, and they're not being phony, and they're not trying to sound intelligent, and they're not
Hmm.
trying to reach me. They're just being, like, this is just coming out of them.
Yeah.
because it has to. That's
Yeah.
the other. And that's the thing, because it's scary when the stuff starts coming out of you because it has to, especially as you
Yeah.
start developing.
Hmm.
That's where like you kind of want to start. You want to shape it and
Yeah.
not let it be its thing, because it's a
Mm,
little scary. So I got to
oh.
mask it. I got to like maybe do a little
Oh,
sandpaper.
yeah.
But that's where the confident vulnerability is. Like, I could let this part of me out.
Hmm.
You know. Again, it goes back to like connecting all the dots. That young guy who was confused about God, I connected to, because I think Trent Reznor did do it well. It was very much confident vulnerability.
Hmm.
It's why every band's first album is so good,
Yeah.
because they're not
Mm,
chasing anything other than to just get it out.
yeah. And then they have to
So,
navigate how to do that again with
mhm,
all the new pressures and dynamics at play.
mhm. So yeah.
Well, Jack, thank you so much for
Well, thank
sharing
you. I
your,
hope, yeah.
yeah, that was great. How could people connect with you if they want to, or are you hidden off in a cave somewhere?
No, I'm not. No, you can find my website, salvatore.salvatore.com. You can message me there. I need to do more with it. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and then yeah, those are the big places you could see me. And then I used to like my work now is not as broad as it used to be. But if you'd like to see some of my past work, my website has it.
Yeah,
You can see it there, and you can see the growth.
yeah. And is there a project that you really want to make happen in the future?
There's three that I really would love to make. One is a World War II story. Never thought I would write historical. Another is I would love to do a musical biopic. I have both of those done, and then I have a horror film that kind of explores in a suspense thriller my view of life inside of like a mega church bubble, but it's done
Okay.
with like a suspense thriller kind of way. So those
Yeah.
are three projects I would love to get off the ground. Like they're done. I just need to get them. So,
So, final question.
mhm.
Have you seen First Reformed?
Yes.
Tell me what you thought about it.
I want to do a David Spade impression.
Okay.
Uh, I liked it better the first time I saw it when it was called Winterlight.
Okay.
Uh, I thought it was really good. I like Paul Schrader a lot. He's one that I'm trying to get. I'm trying to feel where he's writing from. I watched that at a really weird place in my life. Not the
Yeah.
right film to watch. But a similar film to First Reform that was Winterlight that kind of deals with the same themes, but it really gave me a hope that First Reform didn't. And it's Bergman.
Yeah.
So
Mm,
it's Ingrid Bergman taking on the same problem.
okay.
But
Yeah.
it's not as dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my take on First Reformed.
Yeah.
They're very
Yeah.
similar.
Yeah. I haven't seen the other one, so I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I love. I would check out. There's a lot of Bergman. Um, if you want to see, I'll say this: if you want to see filmmakers that explore faith and art really well, I'll say three that inform me. One is Bergman, two is Kozlowski, and is there a third? Scorsese. Those are my big three. Who I feel
Which
like
Scorsese?
well, Mean Streets is one. I haven't gone back and revisited this as a Catholic, but Last Temptation of Christ at one point was real powerful for me. But I think there's a spiritual undercurrent to all his films,
Yeah.
not just the obvious ones. Like
Yeah.
there is a definite spiritual tension. Oh,
Yeah.
Silence.
I was gonna say, Silence is a big
One
one.
of my favorite films of all time.
Yeah.
Love
It's hard
Silence.
to. I have not watched it again, but it was.
No, I can't watch it again either. But
It's
wow,
rough.
Silence is and the mission. But if you really like, I will go watch Red, White, Blue by Kozlowski. It's
Okay.
three of the finest films I've ever seen that
Yeah.
tackle faith and spirituality in a really profound way.
Yeah.
But do you have any recommendations? Let me ask you, do you have any recommendations from I always like to learn?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I do. Well, I'm trying to think of like what have I been watching lately, and have you seen Furiosa?
The Mad Max sequel?
Yeah.
No, I have not seen that yet.
Okay. I think that's a really interesting story just about revenge and retribution and hate
Mm,
and exploring that. And I think what I would add to that that the movie does is it kind of like there are consequences to our actions that
mm.
affect people, and we need to care about that, and when you don't care about it, then it comes back for you. And I think that's an interesting layer of how that movie explores that
Oh,
theme.
I'm going to check it out.
Yeah.
I'm
So
going to check it. You made me now want to see it.
and I loved Mad Max Fury Road, um because the story is fundamentally, the story is about coming back home.
Mm,
It's running away and then coming back. And
mm,
in that case, it's facing the thing that she didn't want to face to begin with.
mm,
And now she gets to the sort of the end of the desert and there's nowhere to go. And so she has to go back, and she chooses to go back. And by going back, she not only overcomes the antagonist, but then she becomes the leader who then liberates the society.
oof,
And so it's kind of a Moses story in that sense. And it's
mhm,
also really interesting, the character of Mad Max, because he's secondary in a sense to her, which goes back
mhm,
to your point of like making the makers or teaching the teachers, which is Mad Max is there to help elevate her and
mm.
then move off onto the next mission. It's not about him, it's about her.
Ooh, that's good. That's a really good take. Now you're going to
Yeah.
make me want to watch Furiosa
Yeah.
because I
So
was like,
now
what
you go
is
watch
this?
Furiosa and then watch Fury Road after that, and you'll see this all
All
tied
right,
in
and then
together.
I'll
Yeah.
text you and let you know.
All right. Let me know if you agree. All
So,
right. Cool.
thank
Well,
you so
thank you
much,
so much.
Jason.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you. This was great.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful day.